We're extremely excited to introduce the next of our speakers, Alyssa Milano, who you probably know from so many different places, but her use of her platform and her extremely eloquent voice and her work to make the world a better place for not just women, but the men who love and respect them, and to be inclusive in conversation, but also to be strong and unapologetic. Those are all the reasons we love her, and we welcome her to come talk to us.
Hi.
Hi, honey.
Thank you for having me.
All right. So I'm told there's no taboo topic when you're talking to this woman.
No, we can talk about anything.
Anything. So I am going to try to keep it at least initially to health, because women's health is so broad, pervasive, and important. I'm going to try not to stay on my notes, but I'm slightly nervous.
Stop.
Because Alyssa's a little bit of a hero of mine.
Oh, stop. Thank you. That's very sweet.
No, and I'll remind you that in the 70s and 80s, there were not a lot of Samanthas, and that was your name on Who's the Boss. And, you know, if you're old enough to relate to back before Samantha was really, now it's very popular. We made it cool. So
it was all you. You made it cool.
Okay, so with regard to women's health, you've been super candid. You've talked about things that need to be normalized. I think you've raised awareness, I think by speaking about anxiety and the connection between anxiety and motherhood, and in a way that I think is really personal and seems very brave. And I wanted to know what made you feel like that was an important thing for you to do, to take what is maybe a personal topic and put it out there.
Well, I think, you know, I want that to be a topic that it doesn't take someone that's very brave to talk about it. I think it's important that we have these discussions, and especially erase the stigma of mental illness. And often I find that we're so conditioned to believe that once you become a mom that everything is rosy and it's easy and you know, we're supposed to be on the white sheets and it's supposed to be so romantic and have these perfect little pink babies, and it's not. It's hard work. And I think the more we talk about that, I think the better it is for everyone, so that when you have a baby and it's not the white sheets and the, you know, the field of daisies, that you don't think it's you, that you don't think it's just you. It's not just you. And also I think we've monetized that industry so much to the extent that you know, everything is about making money with babies, and it really takes away from the fact that this is a real life-changing emotional thing that happens. And we should be able to talk about that and not feel stigma around any of that.
Well, I think that when I contemplate, you know, becoming a mother, no one told me that like breastfeeding hurts. At least it was like extremely painful. It was not the beautiful image that one might think of, like I'm just chilling out looking amazing while I'm, you know, nourishing a baby and it's all perfection and my boobs look great.
But I feel like we've gotten so far away from the village mentality, because, you know, there was a time where we would see other women breastfeed in the village and we'd become conditioned to, you know, oh, my nipples are going to bleed when I breastfeed. We're so far removed from that because we don't see any other women breastfeed that we actually need to bring in a consultant to teach us how to breastfeed, even though it's supposed to be the most natural, beautiful thing in the world, because we just don't see it often enough to know what to do.
No, it's such a great point. There was very little. I was pissed at all my friends and people who hadn't told me that this was hard, that the pain involved might be, if you don't know what you're doing, can be significant, and then you feel really guilty and shitty about it. So all those things, and I think back to the anxiety that you described feeling when you're meant to be feeling the field of daisies and the perfection, is really terrifying, especially if you're trying to get back to work.
And that's not to say that every woman that has a baby is going to go through a bout of anxiety disorder. I was diagnosed with anxiety disorder in my 20s, but I was able to keep it at bay. And I think a lot of that has to do with hormones and female hormones and how things, you know, peak and then dip. And Maybe it has to do with the fact that I had babies later on in my life, because I was 38 when I had my daughter and my son, and 41 when I had my daughter. So basically I was like transitional, which is what they call perimenopausal now.
Oh,
yeah,
that's what
they call it transitional.
That's what's happening?
Yeah. So I was transitional and pregnant, so at the same time, and breastfeeding, so I think that had a lot to do with it. But yeah, these are not things that we're really allowed to discuss. And I think that, if anything, I have nothing to hide. Right. And I feel like your brain is another organ, right? So if you had a heart problem, you'd take medication for your heart problem, and you'd say, I have a heart problem, I can't do that. Well, I happen to have, mental illness. I have anxiety disorder. So I do everything that I can to not only stay healthy, but also to talk about it, because we have to erase that stigma.
Well, I think the talk about it is a big, the BlogHer mission is really to raise up women who are speaking truth, who are educating society, and who are producing from their content and their passions, producing businesses. And I'm this is like my awkward transition to your work as a producer, and kind of looking at how you take what maybe was a passion, a long-term amazing actress, and started contemplating, maybe, I'm suggesting this, the business part of that, and how to be in control as a business person.
Right.
And I'm wondering about that transition, but also, do you feel an accountability? Well, tell everybody maybe about your production work, or producer work, but also, do you feel an accountability to the way you staff, the way you, the composition?
For sure. So I think the producer aspect of what I do within my industry came from just an innate business perspective that I have. And about 11 years ago now, I started a clothing line called Touch, which is all female sports license. So I have the licensing for all the sports leagues. And when I first started that line, it's when the only thing you could find for women sports fans were pink, right? And I called it the Pink It or Shrink It. And that's all that was available. And so my whole thing was like, well, women like fashion, and I don't want to be in a pink Dodgers t-shirt. That just seems ridiculous. So I think because of the success of that, and realizing the fulfillment that gave me, as far as that, having an idea, planting that seed, and cultivating it and watching it grow, got me more interested in producing. And basically, I have found in the last couple of years just amazing content as far as books and stuff, and have bought the rights. I have 5 things right now in development, just from content that I loved, that I bought the rights to, that for film and television.
And when you look at the things you want to invest in, again, shaping shaping me perhaps with Who's the Boss, shaping my daughter with Charmed, a lot of the roles, which I know at its time, Charmed was one of the only programs that had as much representation of women characters. Do you think about that, like when you invest in something or choose to produce something, do you think about what I'm sure you do, how do you think about the roles you're putting on stage, on film, and how they might shape or attack stereotypes? You know where I'm going.
So I think it's important that we tell stories from different perspectives. And a lot of times that means that you're representing a group of people that don't have a voice necessarily. And I love that that's happening in my industry right now, where people are actually being super mindful in how they hire, how they choose to tell stories from different perspectives. And I think it is the only way to really teach empathy and compassion, is through storytelling. We've gotten very far away from this idea of, that I was raised with, put yourself in this person's shoes, put yourself in which is basically what empathy is, and somehow we don't have that anymore. And I think that the thing that the entertainment industry does well, not all the time, but sometimes does well, is it shows a different perspective of life and a different ideology, a different upbringing, different philosophies, and maybe, just maybe, the power in that is it makes us more tolerant.
That's wonderful, and bringing us into worlds that we might not experience otherwise. The empathy outcome is something to celebrate. And as you look forward to the things you want to produce, whether it's within film or television, entrepreneurial endeavors, are you thinking about ultimately the roles that you want your daughter to see or the experiences you want her to live through? Or are you addressing other beyond?
I think yes, in a way, and maybe subconsciously, but I don't look for material based on this would be positive for my kids to see. I do certain specific things. I'm currently right now writing a book, a 4-series children's book called Hope, which is about a little 7-year-old girl who's an activist, and it'll be released in November through Scholastic. And we're doing 4 series. I'm so excited. She's so spectacular. This little girl is just everything. And she basically just fights for things she knows are right through her life, at school, within her family, within her community. So we're not pushing a political ideology, just more of a human, how important it is to be kind and good and stand up for other people.
And maybe that's more what I'm getting at, is as you evolve or change or transition, as we all are, towards that next phase, do you think your thoughts, your perspectives have changed in a really dramatic way, and the way that you want to play a role in society, has that? It feels like you're doing it. You're out there.
Yeah, I think the difference is I was always out there. Just there wasn't social media to show it or highlight it. Like I had to depend on other people to give me platforms to share what I believed in. And now with social media, everyone in this room has their own platform. And I think that's what makes it so incredibly powerful. It really is one moment can create a movement. And what does that mean? What does that mean for our social responsibility, for our communities, for our families? But my activism, I've been an activist since I was 15 years old. And I had a really important life-changing moment when I was 15 years old that has basically built the foundation of who I am as an adult.
Do you want to tell us about that?
Sure. When I was 15, let's see, it was 1980 something. And I think like 88, is that right? 80, I'm clearly really bad at math.
Good thing you're creative.
Yeah. Anyway, in the 80s, it was sort of the peak of Who's the Boss, and it was in the top 10, and the peak of that whole teen magazine thing, and I guess people thought I was cool, although looking at pictures now, I can't even believe they ever thought I was cool. I had really big hair and really big shoulder pads and really big baggy pants, but okay. And I got a phone call one day from Elton John, who told me that a little boy named Ryan White wanted to meet me. And Ryan, for those that don't know, was HIV positive and was kicked out of his school because they were afraid that he would give AIDS to other children. And he fought for his right to go back to school. And I was a role model for him, and so I agreed to meet Ryan, and we became great friends. And he was always consciously trying to erase the stigma around HIV/AIDS, because at that time it was disgusting. It was disgusting how we completely isolated people that were diagnosed with HIV/AIDS. And he asked me to go on national TV with him and kiss him to prove that, to prove that you couldn't get HIV/AIDS from casual contact. And so try getting a boyfriend after that. But I didn't care. I did it, and I realized the power of what being a celebrity meant. And I realized that that's what I had to do for my life, is stand up for people that didn't have that.
That's really young age to figure out.
Yeah. So that's when my activism began. And once you do that, like standing up to anybody just doesn't seem like a big deal.
I'm still getting chills that you were 15.
I was 15, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and you chose to do something that was, this is where you can fucking say you're not brave, but that's like pretty brave. That is, and braver than any.
I knew that, and this is like, I get this question all the time, how do you deal with the negativity on social media? Because I get a lot of it, and I knew that whatever hurt feelings I had, they did not matter compared to the impact that I was able to make. And so at 15, that was a really powerful lesson. And there's not a day that goes by that I don't think about Ryan. And that gift, I mean, what a gift to give someone.
And a very sophisticated understanding of your own power for a young person, probably. I don't know that we all understand
also,
that.
Like, I think back like at my parents and how supportive they were, and it was meant to be. It was just right. And so that has shaped my entire life as far as what I do with my platform.
Well, that is an example for all, I think, and for 15-year-olds, young people who are contemplating how they can be of service, which is something, at She Media we deal with quite a lot, or we look at quite a lot. And I'm not going to ask you about backlash, because I feel like that's something you clearly understand and have integrated as part of your aware. I don't think you probably say anything and believe that no one's going to disagree with you. It's probably something you accept. But we talked about this backstage, but I know that you've also engaged in a really proactive way, it seems, with factions within, say, the women's movement, the wellness movement, and not allowed. I worry that we all have to say the same thing or we're going to be silent. And we will disagree. We will have different tactical plans to achieve change. How have you handled within the greater good, the macro? We want women to be equal. We want equal pay. We want, to normalize, demystify issues around mental health. How do you handle the argument or the debate?
I think for me, there's no perfect movement, right? I mean, I always say, like, shit's gonna get broken. Mm-hmm. Like, there's no perfect ideal movement. There's no perfect ideal political party. So really, for me, it's always been about, what do I believe in? And how can I stick to that? And often we get so caught up in this sort of tribal mentality that we all have to believe the same thing and say the same thing. And it's okay to want the same thing, but to go about it in a different way. And to stay individual. Because it's within the individual that the power lies in, I think. And also, it's within the debate that change happens. When you think about any, backlash, I get that question about Me Too all the time, like, what do you think of the backlash of the Me Too movement? And I'm always like, bring it. Like, because that's where we talk about it. That's where we keep the conversation going. That's where we talk about what's right and wrong, especially with something that deals with sexual misconduct or harassment or assault, right? Because those are the things, there's not even really a vocabulary for those things yet, because we never talked about them in person. So let's talk about it. Let's set the boundaries. Let's say what's appropriate and what's not appropriate, and why we feel that way, and why, even if it seems like a political step back, we're still winning socially because we're talking about it, and women can come together in a room like this and form a sisterhood, which I don't ever estimate the power of sisterhood.
Yeah. Woo! We love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I do worry, for what it's worth, about the inability to manage conflict when you do have similar goals, but you disagree or have different approaches or different experiences, personal experiences. And if we shut each other down, we're just creating yet another cycle of silence. And I worry about that.
I do think it's okay to want to fight for the same things, but staying true to your own principles and what that means to
having
you.
a real fight, not Twitter fight, like having like a real debate, like
a real discussion about it.
Yeah, like let's get into it. Let's get angry and then let's go home friends.
Yeah,
like sports.
Yeah, and I think that that's one thing that we're very good in a lot of respects as far as being part of a progressive ideology is that we talk about things. It's not like a superficial united front. You know, we talk about things and we get to the bottom of it because it's so vital to change.
And I think the idea of an elitist feminist movement has been raised, and there's a lot of good to learn from this. If it's a white woman's plight and it's a 5%, relevant to 5% of the community, of the nation, progress will not be made, and you're probably not a good person, douchey person, if you don't understand.
If we are not fighting for, as white women, if we are not fighting for every woman, we're not going to get this done. We're not going to achieve what we need to achieve. So it's up to us to support, be the voice, to amplify, to hand over the bullhorn, however you want to say it, to the disenfranchised and the marginalized and the people that this really affects. And when you think about what that means, it means the women that are in a prison system that can't report because often their abuser is also the person they would report to. It's women that work in fields that are farmers. It's homeless women, for the love of God. And if we don't reach those women with changing the systemic sexism and misogyny that we have to deal with, it won't get fixed. We're never going to fix it if we don't fix everybody. And it really comes down to those of us with privilege and those of us with white privilege to take care of other people that don't have a voice. And that's just period. That's just, and that it's got to be that way. Otherwise, it's not going to work. It's just not going to work.
And I think you have to insist on not just equal pay, but equal representation within a crew, equal representation within
it's so easy.
casting.
This is not hard.
Like, don't be an asshole. Do it.
This is not hard. You have to hire more women. You have to promote more women into positions of power. You have to give more women opportunity. You have to mentor more women. Equal pay will come once everything else is lifted. But also we have to fight for the marginalized and the women that aren't in those positions. Those are the women that keep me up at night, not my dear friends that walk the red carpet. They're gonna be fine. They're okay. Not to take anything away from their pain, but to me, we've really got to figure out what this all means. And part of that, and this might be an unpopular thing to say, but I'm going to say it anyway, part of that is figuring out what the next step is for men that have been accused of sexual misconduct and abuse, because those men aren't just going to go away. Other companies are going to hire them. So what are we going to do to make sure that those companies actually have some protocol in place so that the women that also work in those companies feel safe? Let's focus on that. Like, what's the policy for men who have been accused of things that come back to a different job? I mean, we can't just put them all on an island and say, they'll be fine. They'll, eat off the trees. like we've got to figure out what that means when men are coming back into these industries, and how that looks.
Yep. How you keep it safe.
How you keep it safe for women and men.
And we are going to run out of time, which is very vexing because this is super fun. But I want to. We try to end on kind of women who have inspired each of us. Yours is a very early story, and it's very evident to me that you aren't going for empowering just me. You are going for people you were able to see when you were very young. And that's unusual to get out of your bubble. And that's just that's not a question, that's just a thank you for that. But someone pretty cool must have been with you in your life as a younger girl who maybe modeled some good behavior.
I have amazing parents. I have amazing parents, and they were always very supportive of me finding my way, me finding my voice, and what that meant for personal fulfillment. But also, I was always surrounded by great people at work, too. I mean, when you think about HIV/AIDS in the 80s, you can't take away the work that Judith Light did. And continues to do for HIV/AIDS, and those were my role models. So and Jane Fonda and all of those amazing women that allowed me to see that this industry could be so powerful, and that to act also meant that I had a certain responsibility, because what a beautiful place to be given this life. So, it's so much more fulfilling for me to use that in a way that hopefully will impact lives, not just in an entertainment sense, but in a soulful sense. And why not?
Yeah, well, that's great. I don't think everyone thinks that way, so it's pretty special to see. This is a totally awkward transition, then we'll go, I swear. But is there a health issue among women, just off the top of your head, that you think it needs to be addressed, demystified? You don't have to have all the data or anything else. Like I would go to, okay, I'll just riff.
Well, I think we need to talk about the fact that they're trying to roll back our reproductive freedom.
That's kind of a thing. Let's talk about that one.
Yeah. I don't think we could talk about women's health without acknowledging the fact that our rights are being stripped from us on a state level, which I think is pretty horrifying, but also on a federal level. And I don't know. It's a really hard battle because what we're dealing with is two very separate belief systems, which, one is a religious, and I will never take away any's right to be religious and believe in what they believe in, but the other side is scientific. And I think this comes down to, in like my formulating, and this is still not like a complete thought, but just go with me on this. I think that you can't separate the fact that they're trying to take away access to birth control and trying to take away access to safe abortions. So I don't know does that mean they want us to not have sex? Are women not worthy of sexual pleasure? Like, what does that mean as far as the religious scope of it? Because I'm pretty sure there's nothing about that in the Bible, right?
That's a whole different
situation. So I don't know how we overcome that. I just know that when first of all, I refuse to call people that are anti-abortion pro-life, because everyone is fucking pro-life. Okay? Everybody is pro-life. There is no one on the planet that is pro-life. So what they come down to is they're anti-choice. They're taking away our choice. And that I have a problem with. And the fact that, that any religious ideology would trump, no pun intended, sorry, no pun intended, forever ruin that word, would trump a scientific. Yeah, I know. I can't. It's so funny. I did this thing for Jimmy Kimmel last week where I sold Trump commemorative plates, and I couldn't say his name without stumbling over it. And I was like, oh my God, this is like a deep-rooted, I can't even say his full name. Yeah, so anyway, so where a religious ideology would trump scientific facts. And it's a very tricky thing, but everyone has to get involved in that fight. I look at my daughter and the idea that she wouldn't have physical autonomy over her life, or just even being able to pick when she would be ready to have a child, and it's terrifying to me. And I know it's like it's a topic that nobody really wants to talk about, but much like mental illness and racism. Yeah. It's funny because the ACLU just named me their ambassador for reproductive freedom, which is so lovely. It's great. But I was like, you couldn't give me an easier position, something kind of neutral. You had to just throw me into. But it's something that I think is worth all of us fighting for, and really learning the history of that fight, because it goes on generations and generations. They've been trying to take it away from us for generations and generations. And mind you, again, we go to the race issue. Rich, white people will always be able to afford and get a safe abortion. So the rights that they're trying to strip away from us are going to hurt the marginalized and the women that are most at risk, that have very low income, that are not going to be able to travel to a different state to get a safe abortion. They're going to be hurt. They're going to try to get an abortion no matter how they get it. So it unfortunately, in this country, a lot of it stems back to racism.
So that's...
Sorry. On that note, have a good day, everybody.
Goodbye. Okay, thanks. It's an uplifting moment. She's very pretty. Look at her face. No.
Well, you asked about women's health. That's a big one.
When Sam from Who's the Boss starts wonking out, I can really. But so might we see you in office someday?
Like a political office?
Like a political office?
I don't even know what that looks like. I get asked this question all the time, and to be honest with you, I think it's not much different than what I'm doing now, and I'd really love the staff. So, because I do it all myself now. Right. So I'd love that person where I'm like, can you talk to me about immigration in a way that I don't have to go through so much research? So I would love it in that respect, but I don't even know what that trajectory looks like. Do I start on a local level? Do I I don't
talk
even
about
know.
it. We'll get it. We'll have a conversation.
If anyone
about
has
that,
any ideas, tweet
path.
me, because
that was
I
a
don't
great
know.
big answer. That was a big yes, you'll see me in 2028, and I will be
2028.
Yeah, that.
Maybe,
come on, man.
Maybe.
That's the right year.
It's something that I think
right
about
year.
for sure. And plus, who wants to grow old in the entertainment industry?
Yeah. Fuck that. You'd be really young in politics.
How cool is Nancy Pelosi right
So
now with her
badass.
gorgeous skin and her
dress,
her beautiful Jackie O suits? That's what I want to be. Yep. I don't want to be the entertainment 60, 70-year-old. I want to be the Nancy Pelosi.
You'll be hot as shit.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so that we do have to roll. Thank you so much for your honesty and
it's
everything
my
else.
pleasure. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.